You're still on mute.
You hear me now? Thank you, Sophia. So if you can, please turn on your cameras. We're recording. We'll go ahead and jump into the breakout group questions, excuse me. So the first question, what was the thesis of the text? What was your contemporary analysis of the reading? What does the thesis say about the possibilities for race relations within the United States? Thinking about race relations between indigenous or so-called Hispanic folks and African descendant folks. And then finally, what stood out to you most within the text? Who would like to share what was discussed in their breakout groups? Go ahead, Sylvia.
I'd actually like to nominate Sophia to share her contemporary analysis. If she's comfortable, I think it was awesome. I think she should share.
Okay, Sophia, you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. I just put that Black influence has a lasting effect on many cultures, and what was brought up in the text a lot was how when they were trading, their influence was appealing, and in many ways that's still like in play today. So for example, people who aren't Black wearing braids and people who aren't Black having a Black scent. And I was just going in further about like how Black people had to fight for their existence like here. And that's something that white people can't like relate to, and they can never relate to. And so just because of that idea, they're trying to pick apart and try and relate to them in some other way, if that makes sense. Because they're gonna feel the real pain. So they're just like, let me see if I can find something else, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And I think you're talking some real shit when you come to that Black scent, right? Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, like, that's one of the biggest pet peeves of mine is the Black scent. Or like the whole Travis Kelce phenomenon, right? Like how that motherfucker invented the fade. Black folks were wearing fades even before he was born, but they give this white man the credit for some shit that we've been doing, right? So good call out. What about the thesis of the text? What are the main points? What are the main arguments? We'll discuss that as the thesis of the reading. Jesus, what did you state as a thesis for the reading?
Yeah, for the thesis, I said that it was about how the African tribe, I think it was the Mandingos, how the Mandingos came over and basically traded resources, cultures, and religion with the Mexican natives, like with the Aztecs.
Okay.
And I think that that was, yeah, I think that was it.
Okay, no, I think that's correct, right? So let's think about question 2, based off what Jesus has told us about the thesis of the reading, right? What does that thesis say about the possibilities for indigenous or so-called Hispanic or so-called Mexican people to get along with African descended people? Hey, Zeus, do me a favor, state the thesis one more time, please.
The Mandingo, an African tribe called the Mandingos came over and trade resources, culture, and religion with the natives.
Okay, so the exchange of culture, the exchange of religion, and the exchange of customs between African descended people and the inhabitants of the US soil, right? This is the thesis, the main points of the reading. The ability for African people to exchange religion, culture, and customs with the native people of the Americas, right? That's the thesis. So what does that particular thesis say about the possibility of Black folks in Hispanic folks getting along in our world today? Go ahead, Mashara.
I think it means that we're very similar nowadays because they had an influence back then. So it's
I'll take that, right? There's similarities, yes. But again, think about the reading, right? While there were similarities within that culture, there was differences also, right? Just like now, while there's similarities between indigenous folks and African folks, there's differences, right? But what the text talks about, what the reading talks about, is the capacity for those differences to produce sameness. For those seemingly things that are conflictory or producing conflict to produce harmony and unity. So, in other words, if the past has showed us that African people and indigenous people could come together to produce culture, then it should not be on the thought of reason that in our current moment or in the future, African and indigenous people could come together to produce culture. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to get you to see is the thesis, the main point of this text speaks to the historical capacity of these two communities to come together and produce one culture historically. So let me phrase you the question this way then. What's preventing these two communities from coming together to produce culture now?
Maybe ego. I mean, people always want to be the best, right? Innately.
Okay. Ego. What I also hear, and people wanting to be the best, competition, right? So we're competing to see who's the best. And I would also agree that ego is tied with that. What else? What prevents us from getting along as African and indigenous people?
Beliefs.
Beliefs? Elaborate.
Like let's say they have this like very similar culture, but like they have like different, you know, belief in things. Like they wouldn't really stay together if they have different beliefs, you know.
Okay. So different belief systems. Okay. Belvina?
Sometimes what's an issue is that people, they don't like sharing responsibility for creating something. They like to even when someone helped them create something, they like to say mine. You know, the minute that there's going to be some sort of reward or there's going to be some sort of benefit, they like to act like they were the only ones who made it.
And I think that also ties back to what Sylvia was saying in the sense of competition and ego, but I think you're absolutely right, Belvina. Symphony, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I was thinking like the stigmas that other races might have towards each other might cause them not to like, they have certain thoughts about the other races that they might not want to work with them to come together.
Can you speak to some of those stigmas possibly?
Well, like we talked about last class, like some people might see Black women as like angry Black women or like, I don't really know what's going on. It's just like racism plays a part, I guess, in it in some sort of way. I don't really know any other stigmas besides that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right? And tying the trope of the angry Black woman to these stereotypes and myths that we learned about last week. That's the same stigmas and how they play out. Absolutely. What stood out to you most within the reading? Who would like to share?
I think for me it was
oh,
definitely.
sorry.
Oh my bad. You can go
Right,
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Dusty. We haven't heard from you.
Okay. In my group, we talked about how like in rituals, they would use like animal blood, like chicken blood, and then eventually moved up to like human blood, like human sacrifices. We thought that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Sylvia?
I just, it was more of an observation about how the Black merchants, they were literally just like being themselves. They weren't forcing anything. And that just, like, just whatever they were just doing just attracted and just spread.
Yeah, I think that's a real call out. Good call out. They weren't doing anything extravagant. They weren't doing anything outside their norms. They were just being their Black, beautiful selves. And just by being their Black, beautiful selves, this garnered some attention from the indigenous people of the Americas, right? I think it's a very good call out. One more, what stood out to you in the text? Go ahead, Anthony.
So I think I might need to reread again, but I noticed that even though there was a mixing of cultures, there wasn't really like one culture trying to overtake the other instead of just like them unionizing as one. So there wasn't too much violence either.
It's a really good call out. Yes, you're absolutely right. There was no violence, right? There was no wars, there was no conquering, there was no pillaging. They were able to successfully coexist together. All right. So this is the book that you've read, or the chapter that from the book that you read. They came before Columbus, the presence of the African presence in the ancient Americas. The author of the book is Ivan van Sertima. He's a historian. Very seminal book in the Africana studies canon. So we'll get into the text.
Hey, Professor, I have a question before you begin. I just wanted to ask, like, what constitutes a culture, like being a culture? And I guess I'm asking because, like, do white people have a culture?
Yeah, I would say so. What I'm gonna do is I will reflect the question to the class. What's white culture? So ways I think about culture: music, dress, food, style, aesthetic, vernacular expression, right? Artistic expression. Can even be things as trivial, I'll put air quotes on that, dance, right? So if these are some of the things that insinuate culture, what is Anglo-American, Anglo-European culture? Go ahead, Bobina.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest and say it is kind of hard to see what exactly might be Anglo-European culture. Simply because the fact that, well, I'm not trying to be rude, but a lot of people of that culture feel like, some people of that culture, not everyone, feel like they have to act a certain way just to fit in instead of just being themselves. But be honest, I have grown up around different races, and I can honestly say, like, maybe it goes back to roots of I could be wrong, so I apologize if I am, but like, like German roots, Irish roots, but I could be wrong.
Okay. So if we're tracing back the lineage, right, you're looking to like some possibly the Greco-Roman era. Some of them may have Irish descendancies, right? Descendancies. Who else? What is Anglo-European culture? I think one of the ways I'm thinking about this as I hear the question, there's a great discourse right now going on around Beyonce's record, right? Who is the originator of country music? Now, some segments of the population say that that is an aspect of white culture, right? It's a white cultural expression. Country music, country folklore, line dancing, and things of this nature are aspects of white expression. Some people say, nah, Black folks been doing country music and having country culture, right? So again, I asked the question, what is white culture? Because I think it's a very profoundly important question that she brings up. So, okay, We're talking about food. Food. Give me some white food.
Hot dogs and hamburgers.
Hot dogs and hamburgers, okay. The barbecue, right? What else? Casseroles?
Mac and cheese.
I don't know. I think you got the mac and cheese, Sylvia. I think that I would put that. Well, look, I don't know who invented it, but I have a venture that's to say whose tastes better. I don't know. What else? Come on. You got hot dogs and hamburgers. Spaghetti, Italian. So would that be like European culture, or could you classify that within white culture? Which I think. I'm just talking to myself. What's up?
I feel like the white culture is separated into different pieces, like, because I feel like Europeans that don't live in America don't want to be associated with American culture, white American culture. So, I don't,
You draw a line of distinction there.
yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's a very specified form of culture. I think even if you look at Italians as a whole, right, they're very proud and they're very ethnocentric, right? And I think they'll be reluctant to be flattened into some form of Americanism. At best, I think they would say that they're Italian Americans or what have you, right? So I would agree. Tease this out with me, y'all. Go ahead, Bovina.
I also have a feeling that because I know there's a such thing as like cultural appropriation.
Okay.
I feel like it's probably easier for people who are, probably white to appropriate cultures because they can just switch it on and off. If they decide, oh, I'm going to speak in Blaxican, they can just speak in Blaxican. And then when they decide to speak back not in Blaxican, no one's really going to question it. And a lot of times they become popular for it, as was said before. Like the whole thing with, I think it was Hailey Bieber and brownie lips or whatever. Like that was originally made for Latina women and Black women because we have darker skin, but she made it a thing, so it's easier to appropriate it.
Absolutely. Sophia?
Yeah, I'm just speaking off of my own experience. Like my dad's from Poland,
Okay.
and all his family side is just like, well, what he taught me growing up was he didn't want me to be like an American. That's what he told me, like straight word for word. He was like, it's clearly different, like American white and European white. And like I'm really proud of my Polish side. So like I definitely do see a big difference. So I agree with like the line.
Okay. Sophia, what's the other side? You got Polish and what else?
My mom's Ecuadorian, like
Okay.
for Latina. So
All right. So we're gonna get into that conversation in a little bit. Real quick, just I don't want to belabor this too long because I'm looking at the time. Give me some aspects of Mexican culture.
Music.
What kind of music, Jose?
Like corridos.
Okay. Something else. What else we got for Mexican culture?
Food.
I was gonna say reggaeton. I really like that music.
Okay. Music, food. So we like what? Burritos, tacos, right? Ceviche, things of that nature, right? So y'all know what culture is. I just want to see if it's just a question of culture that we're dealing with, or you don't know what culture is. But clearly, we know what culture is. But for some reason, it's getting kind of auspicious as it comes to pinpointing white culture. So for the sake of time, we'll get into the reading. And I'm gonna move kind of quickly because we are kind of pressed on time. I'm looking at the second full paragraph on page 93. And this talks about how they came into the Americas, the Africans. They came at first in twos. And then in a small band, their coming attracted attention, but this was less because of the extraordinariness of their appearance. Foreigners, after all, were expected to look different than the extraordinariness of their wares. So we're not tripping about how they looked, right? The dark skin is not what's having people be astonished. It's about what they're bringing, okay? Some of the luxuries they offered in the common marketplace had been enjoyed almost exclusively by the noblemen and kings of Mexico, who seem to have had some earlier contact with them. In the reign of the Quetzalcoatl, they had suddenly appeared, the spearhead of a larger migrating group. Out of what world they had originally come, no one knew, but they trickled in from the direction of the south and the southeast. It seemed as if everyone were on the move at the same time. All sorts of people were gravitating towards the lakes from the nucleus of New Mexico. So one, right, I have to kind of tip my hat to the indigenous people of the Americas as they seen the African people come into their area, right? They didn't automatically dismiss them because of the color of their skin. That didn't even register to them. What attracted to them was the things that they had, right? What they were able to trade with. And for the indigenous folks, right, they recognize that, damn, the shit that they got is the same stuff that our kings got, right? And so Van Sertima is letting us know that there had to be some type of agreement or contract that these traders established with the kings, right? Real quick, I just want to read this just because the way they describe their garb, right? These Black merchants from the hot lands sold vivid colored mantles of cotton cloth. The cloaks were so richly dyed, they seemed to copy the iridescent plumage of the bird. So various in design that the radial wheel of the sun, feathers and stylized shells, the skin of tigers, and the forms of rabbits, snakes, fishes, and butterflies mingled in the myriad of motifs with triangles, polygons, crosses, squares, and crescents, right? So like, that's just how cold the African style was, right? And I don't think that has been removed in our today, right? If you see Black adornment, if you see Black stylistic expression, it's in a canon of its own, right? No one could dress like Black people, and particularly Black women, right? So they're talking about once they get established in this area, right? It says, but the Blacks had built a temple in the town as soon as they had formed a sizable capulli, C-A-P-U-L-L-I, and that's just like a sizable community, right? In the forecourt of this temple, they set up the wooden statue of a werewolf, who was their Nagual. This statue fascinated him. So the Africans get set up, they get settled, and then once they get settled and they have a sufficient amount of numbers, right? They start erecting their temples and erecting their honors, homages to the gods. Again, think back to last week's reading. They had the knowledge to build large homes and temples or small huts to be broken down. So obviously they felt secure in where they were at because they were able to build these large temples, right? Okay, a little bit below that passage on page 95, it says they were daughters of the feather workers who had been taken to wife by the Blacks. Thus had the gods and rituals of the natives and the foreign, of the Poteca and the Amenteca slowly fused. So he's pointing us to the fact that through marriage, right, through romantic relations, you also see the confluence of culture. Now, again, let's think back to last week's reading, right? Also in the Destruction of Black Civilization, it talks about how the Asian migrants in particular would marry into the royal Black families, right? That way they have access to their goods, have access to their land, they have access to their resources, right? Because at this time in Africa, you could not have access to these things unless you had the royal blood, right? So again, these Asian migrants would make sure to marry into the royal family so they have access to these things. This is vastly different from what's going on in this reading, right? You still see the confluence, right? You still see the marriaging taking place, but it's not with the premise of to conquer. It's not with the premise to extract resources, right? This coming together produced a unified culture. Looking on page 96. He says, it is with Mexico, however, that we are most concerned. For here, we can see the confluence of culture not just the confluence of blood. So again, he's concerned with Mexico because not only do you see the confluence of blood, but you see the confluence of culture. So let me ask you, how do you produce the confluence of blood? How does that blood get mixed? Yeah, it don't have to necessarily be love, Belvina, but I see what you're saying, right? Fucking, right? Get together, people make relations, make babies, blood gets mixed, right? Ain't nothing special about it, it's just what it is, right? But what Van Sertima is saying, while yes, we know that this confluence of blood takes place, because again, pointing you back to last week's reading, the Asians were masterful at doing that in Africa, right? But what's more important, what's more fecund is the production of a culture. Anybody could come together to make babies. It's different to come together and to respect and revere the other person's culture. And this is what Van Sertima is pointing us to, right? So if I continue, right? When we compare the cult of the werewolf, the coyote of the prairies, found among the Amanteca, with the cult of the werewolf, the hyena of the savannah, found among the Bambara of medieval Mali, we see quite clearly that we are at the head of that confluence. So what they're saying there, so if you look at what the indigenous folks of the Americas were doing with their religion of the coyote, sorry, with the werewolf religion, right? And for the indigenous people of this land, they don't have hyenas out here, right? There ain't no prairies, sorry, there ain't no savannas, there ain't no hyenas, but what we do have out here are coyotes, right? So the closest thing to the werewolf in the West is the coyote. For the Mantinka of, for the Bambara of medieval Mali, what they had in place of the hyena, sorry, for their werewolf god, they had the hyena, right? Because where they reside, they don't have coyotes, but they have hyenas, right? So what he's saying is, this is the most pristine example of how these two cultures come together to produce a culture. So again, we could talk about coming together to make babies. That's less interesting than the ability to come together and recognize and respect someone else's culture. To my point, if you think back to like 2020 and we had like that George Floyd summer and everything shut down, right? No sports, no entertainment. We just had to kind of deal with the racial unrest of the country. I was attentive to Twitter and I was attentive to all the interracial dating that was taking place. And I was struck by the commentary around like, man, I've been with my white husband for X amount of years and we have so many kids and I can't believe how racist he is. So we can come together to make these babies, but that does not mean that that individual will respect your culture or vice versa. This is complicated by the racial hierarchy within our society. Does not our racial hierarchy go white, Asian, brown, indigenous folks, right? Black folks. So when you're talking about these relationships, that hierarchy is not removed. That still sets in place. This is why when you hear Black folks say things like, ooh, I'm gonna give me a white boy so I can get, my baby can have curly hair. Is that not speaking to this racial hierarchy? Y'all know who Patrick Mahomes is? Y'all know Patrick Mahomes. Okay, so for the football fans in the room, for those who watch Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback of the Chiefs. Look at his dad. Google his dad, and then Google his child. 2 generations. That Blackness is gone. Also speaks to the racial hierarchy in our country. So in my estimation, and I'm gonna put great emphasis in estimation, but in my estimation, I got you, Sylvia, until we remove this racial hierarchy that operates within our society, a notion of an interracial relationship just being about love is complicated. Sylvia?
Is taking advantage of the racial hierarchy like bad though? Because like, yes, I get like a woman would say, I'm gonna get me a white boy, you know, so my kid can have curly hair, but like at least her kid will benefit more in society because of the unfortunate truth that the racial hierarchy exists. And like the kid will have like more things that the mom wouldn't have had, kind of benefiting from that.
I mean, if you see that as a benefit, for me personally, I wouldn't want social privilege and not know who I truly am. That's not an even exchange for me. I need to know who I am to me, because that's going to ground me in how to navigate and move through this world. Think about how many people who, think how to put this. I'm thinking about Tommy Davidson, but y'all probably don't even know who that is. How many people who grow up around folks that don't look like them and how they begin to honor the cultures of the other people. Does that make sense? So yeah, you could talk about social uplift, but what comes with that social uplift is the devaluing of yourself. So if you're trying to give your son or your daughter that social uplift, you're from Kenya, correct?
Yeah.
So chances are your white baby daddy ain't gonna tell their kids about how Kenyan they are, nor will he care about that. Nor will it not benefit them to know about their Kenyan essence, because that's gonna keep them from the social uplift.
Okay,
Same way
that makes
plays
sense.
out.
I understand.
Same way that plays out when migrant communities come to the United States, right? To go through the test to become a citizen, you're tested on becoming American. It's not about who you are, right? It's about getting rid of that so you can understand how it means and what it means to be an American. Go ahead, Bovina. Can you say that out loud, please? I think it's a good point.
Okay, so my question was how, okay, if the parent never loved themselves and their culture, how can the mixed kid in theory love the side of the parent who dislikes their race? For instance, I'm just gonna be real. I'm a Black girl and my boyfriend, he's Mexican. If I never learned to love my Black roots, my Black culture, and we had a kid, that kid is still gonna be Black at the end of the day and Mexican. If I never learned to love that side of myself, how am I gonna teach that kid how to love that side of themselves? Which is why, yes, in theory, you can get with someone of a different race so that your kid can be more advanced or whatever, or be seen differently by society. But at the end of the day, you have to teach them at home that they can love themselves for what they are. And I feel like that's when a lot of harm comes into play. I feel like I've seen a lot of like Black men being like, I need to get me a white girl because they have this inner self-hatred that came from how their Black mother raised them. And they think that's going to make things better. But they should also work on loving themselves and loving their culture, because being with someone of a different race isn't going to erase all of the self-hatred that one might have. Not saying that's always the case, but that is sometimes the case.
Yeah, I would say, I would go on the line and say, in my estimation, again, great emphasis on estimation, more often than not, that's the case. More often than not. We got 10 minutes left. I think we get squeezed in a fishbowl with the last 10 minutes. We could talk about my notes on the reading. We could talk about your breakout discussions. You could read from your journal, 2 per semester, 1 time to pass. I'll take volunteers first, and if not, I'll start calling on people. Does anyone want to volunteer? All right, so I'll start calling at random. Dante, are you prepared to fishbowl? Dante Crenshaw, are you prepared to fishbowl? So Dante, I'm gonna put you in the waiting room, and you've used your pass if you hear me. So you know, next time I call on you, you do have to participate in the fishbowl. Next up, Matthew, are you prepared to fishbowl?
Can you remind me what the fishbowl is? I've written down notes.
So you could either read from your notes, you could talk about anything that was of interest to you in my conversation, or something that was talked about in your breakout groups that was of interest.
On the reading particularly, I just found
Give me
the
one second.
amount.
Let me get the other participants before I let you go, okay?
Oh, okay.
So thank you. I got you. Ulysses, are you prepared to fishbowl?
Yeah, I'm prepared.
Perfect. Last person, Kiara, are you prepared to fishbowl?
Yeah.
So Matthew, you'll set us off. We're ready when you are.
Yeah, I just thought the sheer amount of comparisons throughout, I believe it was 18 pages, was quite astonishing. Like I feel like every single paragraph had a different comparison. I found particularly that they said that Mexicans carry like the cargo on their head as well as Africa, and they got that from the African influence. Another I know it was just a small line in the reading, but it said they couldn't tell if the cloud was from the volcano or the foreigners burning the branches. I feel like you can interpret that in different ways as to a lot of social unrest that happens now. Also, another line was they said that Black merchants from hot land sold colored garments and golden earrings and smoking pipes. I thought that was interesting as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Ulysses, you're up next.
Yeah. So in like in the breakout room, I was discussing with my peers about how it was interesting how Mexicans actually like they look like us. Not all of them, but like some of them did. And actually back like um in high school, I learned about like one of the wars that happened. And, like some of the Mexicans actually, because they look so white, like they can pass for being white, that they actually joined one side of the war to fight against each other. So, and I thought, I mean, honestly, like I didn't like that because I mean that's crazy how your own people can turn on you. Um, but I definitely that was one thing I learned in this reading that they did look at like us, and also about how they'd wake up, they would use all these tools and stuff, such as like the boats and stuff to fish, to get food, and to bring it back to the village and stuff. So I thought that was interesting.
Thank you, Ulysses. Kiara, it's on you.
I just want to say, I found the Mandingos, the story. It was interesting how everyone, like everybody brought their cultures together and they like was all bonding over it. I just like how different cultures, they all have like different ways to live in life and like their everyday life.
Perfect. Thank you. So before we close out, two quick points I want to make. First is a question. Thinking about the word race, but not thinking about identity. How else is this word race used in the English language? Go ahead, Symphony. You gonna say something?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you unmuted yourself.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sylvia. Or Belvina or Sylvia, whoever would like to say. Sure.
Like a run.
Like a run. Is that what you're gonna say, Belvina?
I was gonna say either like a run or like when people are driving. It's some sort of activity where people are trying to pass each other up.
So another way to state that is competition. Competition, right? So let me ask you, why do you think the powers that be employed this word race to signify ethnic identities? What's the correlation between that?
Can you repeat your question?
So if the other way that we think about race outside of identity is competition, why do you think they would classify us in separate races to indicate our ethnic identity?
Maybe to signify that there's one to like there's ultimately going to be one at the top of the pyramid of races.
Okay. Who else? Why would they use this term race, which means competition? Go ahead, Kiara.
I think they just mean that all the races are like against each other. They're making it a competition, basically.
All competing for resources. This is why they have classified this as racist. We're racing against one another for resources. Oh, they can't come over the border because they're going to take our jobs, right? So the fear is that these people will come and compete at a higher level for your employment opportunity. But this is a false notion because there's enough jobs for everyone. There's enough houses to end homelessness, right? There's enough food in this country to end food insecurities. How much food does restaurants throw out on a daily basis? And how long could that go to assisting those who don't have food, right? So what I'm trying to get you to understand is that we've been put into this competition with one another for no fucking reason. The only reason why we have this competition is to maintain this system of capitalism that we're all existing under. Because if you know that there's enough jobs for everyone, would you work for less pay than someone else if you know that there's enough jobs for everyone? Absolutely not. It wouldn't make sense for me to take less money to do the same thing when there's enough spaces for everyone to work. But it does make sense to take less when you think there's not enough jobs for everyone. So if you think there's not enough jobs for everyone, you'll say, well, look, pay me 50 cents less, and then that way I can ensure that I'm working. So you see how this notion of capitalism is dependent upon this competition that is unnecessary, which is why we've been classified into races. My last point. All right. So these are pictures of the Olmec heads in the region that we read about for today's reading. If you look at the face of these individuals, very beautiful broad nose, beautiful broad lips, right? Very African features. If you look at the back of the Olmec heads, they have, what kind of hairstyle is that? What does that look like?
Braids, cornrows.
Yeah, it's braids, right? So we know who is the inventor of braids and cornrows, African people, right? So what this is physical evidence of the African presence in the Americas prior to the arrival of Christopher Columbus. Now, how insane European and Western scholars are, is they may have the excuse that the reason why they look like that, the reason why these large stones look this way, is that they rolled down a hill, and as they rolled down the hill, it ran up against different rocks, and it made the faces, it made the lips, it made the, really? I feel you, Destiny. Like, that's the most biggest boat of bullshit I didn't ever, like, what the fuck? Really? It rolled down the hill and it made them look African? That's what we going with, right? That's the equivalent to me of them saying that the aliens came down and built the pyramid, right? This is the lengths that they're willing to go through to deny our humanity and our intellectual production. Remember, we don't meet on Wednesday. We'll meet on Monday back via Zoom. Please have the Souls of Black Folks, the first chapter of our spiritual strivings, read for Monday's class. I'll try to remember to put an announcement. We're reading the Souls of Black Folks, the first chapter of our spiritual striving for Monday's class. And then hopefully I'll be able to see you all in person on Wednesday as we get to engage the work of Runoko Rashidi, who focuses on like these Olmec heads and the African presence prior to Columbus, as well as the spaces like Asia and things of that nature. So it should be interesting.